afternoon, all of you, back after lunch, and good afternoon for those online today. As Dario explained, this is just a start of a journey we're going to make. I can recall a MEF session about 20 years ago. This was just when MEF was launched, and we did a session on mobile TV. Mobile TV session in Cannes 20 years ago in the auditorium pulled massive amount of people. Yeah, and here we are today at the start of a journey just after lunch, filling in the room. But I think we all have to engage and we all have to lean forward, because I think that is the theme of this awakening session. There will be a lot of demands from our customers, whether that is an end consumer or whether it's in business to business. Like Dario says, we have to be compliant, but compliant to what and how do we get there? So these are key questions. So the first, let's say, session we will have today is about awakening, getting awareness, getting the word spread. The second approach is more about in-depth, more about, let's say, what are the alternatives? How do we embed a viable strategy? And finally, in the third approach, is more about planning. How to create a plan, how can we execute on it and measure results? And finally, we hope to come to a kind of what we call policy. Some of you are also a member of the GSMA and already adhere to the, let's say, sustainability goals of the GSMA. But some of us, and most of us, don't, yeah, because we're not a GSMA member and not a licensed operator. So therefore, I just would like to share. It doesn't mean that I have all the know-how, no, but we will have the speakers and we have the questions registered. And very happy I am that today here is Jan-Willem Janning, a fellow Dutchman, Managing Director of Global Sustainability Value Chain at Accenture. Now, Accenture is not yet a MEF member. That might change, Jan-Willem. But Accenture, in its name, from the origin, means, Jan-Willem, it is the accent to the future. Yeah? So it is focusing on the future. The company is focusing and helping its customer base globally to focus on the future. And to see, of course, how digital tools can help to create a new future and to help to, let's say, change the business. I have asked Jan-Willem to join us, also because he's personally very passionate about climate, and we'll go a little bit in depth on that topic later on. But I'll first have a short presentation, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then we'll go to a Q&A session. So these kind of images we all know, yeah? This is not new. What to me is new, when you see this, let's say, these areas of impact of climate change, is that the red spots get bigger, but they also get redder. So if you look at these images from a couple of years ago, you would see that the scale only would go up to +4 degrees. Now already it's measured that some areas of the globe have already a +7 degrees warming. So this is just I would say, a waking up. But if we look at the latest report of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it said that the recent changes in the climate are widespread, rapid, and intensifying, and unprecedented, if you look 1,000 years back. So it's going faster, it's changing, the world is changing. And why is it changing? Merely because of greenhouse effects. Yeah, we are heating up the globe. We all know that, we are all intelligent people. What is interesting in our discussions is that 80% of the total greenhouse emissions are coming from carbon dioxide. Yeah? And of course there's a lot of other, let's say, contributors to it, but it is in a way a little bit easier to focus on that only because it contributes a lot and it's quite easy to understand where the CO2 is coming from. Yeah? But if we think about climate change, this is to change and to mitigate with the effects, but it only can work if we look at a wide range of solutions. there's no single solution. And it's also not good to waste time on which solution is the best. We all have to do our efforts with different methodologies, and we'll come to that later. And we'll have Celia Sapar. She's the Director of Communications and Science at CO2 Value Europe. CO2 Value Europe is an organization, a European organization, not for profit, who is actively looking at CO2 emissions, capturing CO2, and reusing CO2. Yeah, that's the beautiness. We can use CO2, we can, let's say, reuse by taking CO2 out of the air and make, for example, synthetic fuels. So there are different reasons why we have to do it. And as we are here all together, we know these kind of wildfire pictures because of heated situations. We see them every year in America, as an example. The tornadoes, whatever you want to call them. Climate effects. We see floodings, Asia. And we see a lot of drought. Yeah? So these are the key impacts we see from climate change. Now this sounds a little bit far away, but if you now look at the last assessment of the IPCC report, which came out recently, we see on the left side, we see the globe, yeah, divided in 45 different areas. One of them, in the middle of the circle, is Western Europe. Now what I find intriguing is to understand and to see that this is happening here. It's happening, let's say, in the theater next to us. It is here, it's in Europe. Why? Because the impact from hot extremes is significant. Then, in the middle, you see the impact from heavy rains. And also, we have the problems coming up from drought. Yeah? Especially in the Netherlands, it's a very weird country. We have places which are 12 meters below sea level. We have rivers flowing in from Germany. We have the rising sea level. Already now, thousands of km of inland dikes are leveled up 5 meters. And that's just an example how the Netherlands is working as infrastructure to deal with the effects of climate change. Some examples that we can't run away from are the wildfires. And where was this? Remember this last summer? You can see it maybe from the firemen. The wildfires in Athens almost reached the city boundaries. Luxembourg tornadoes, 2 of them last summer. Strange, huh? We didn't have tornadoes before. The last one was one coming from France, Luther, through Germany, more than 25 years ago. But this happened twice last summer in Luxembourg. And the floodings because of the heavy rain in Germany, not far from here. 200 people died. And we are here at the messaging conference. Now, what the problem was for the German network operators is that they were not able to send warning SMSs to the people in that region because of privacy regulations. So people are now working on it, that this cannot happen again, at least that you can warn people for things to happen like this. So why these pictures? Because there's a different future ahead of us. Yeah? We don't know, and this picture is a bit blurry by purpose, because we don't know where we will end. Yeah? The pictures you saw are a little bit in the middle, I think. But now I go to the more sunny side of life. So we are actually investing a lot. Everybody's working on it, and this is not new. This is the infrastructure. Wind parks just outside of the coast of the Netherlands. We see huge fields of solar panels arising for alternative electricity. And this is one of my favorite companies, world leading in what we call direct air capture. Yeah? It's a Swiss company. And here they take CO2 out of the air and use it in different methods. So where's the CO2 coming from? It's coming from our own emissions. Whether we are now a company of a person, and this is a personal example, still very valid. research which came out a couple of weeks ago dealing with France. So it's a French, let's say, graph, but it's showing very clearly that we, as a person, on average, in Western Europe, emit about 10,000 kilos of CO2 per year. Per year. That's not nothing, that is a lot. Luckily, nature is absorbing it as well, but not all of it, and that's the problem. What I wanted to show here is that, let's say, half of it is going into transportation and food. Yeah, that's one half. The other one is more the housing and leisure time and public infrastructure in the bottom. And the circle you see about electronics and telecoms. Yeah? Telecom and electronics support these emissions with about 180 kilo per person per year. Now, that is a lot if we think about the billions of people with a mobile phone. Yeah? So even our mobile phones and the underlying infrastructure is emitting. But everything helps. Everything we do can help to reduce. And what is the goal? Of course, the goal is to reduce our emissions towards 2030 by half, yeah, just by half. And the GSMA, in the Sustainable Development Goals, number 13, they have already defined that this has to be done. At the moment, about 30 operators are adhering to these principles and have embedded really in the organization a sustainable strategy with goals and plans. Yeah? Having goals is not so difficult, but really executing on them is not that easy. But 30% is wonderful, but we're not there yet. It means that 70% of the global telecom operators are not yet there. And for most of them, because they are stock listed, you're more or less, let's say, bound to the ESG reporting guidelines. Yeah? And there are rating companies checking those ESG reportings, whether you did a good job or not. But a lot of them still have to adhere, and we, as companies, smaller companies, are not obliged to report anything. Yeah? And that is, I think, the key question is, how do we, as an industry, as the telecom industry, contributing to these, let's say, emissions, are going to work on it? What I just share here is now that some companies in Barcelona were very green. Yeah? I don't say that this is greenwashing, but in the green, let's say, shift is already visible from these stands. Yeah? This is Zain creating a sustainable digital future. It's a very nice claim. Also here the Vodafone stand. Normally Vodafone is very red. A very green, big logo, living logo with Dominique Rousseau, the handset director. He will be one of our next speakers in the next sessions. How you work with sustainability in the value chain of millions of devices. But this is, I think, interesting to share. Some operators were already 100% renewable when it comes to usage of electricity for their European network. Yeah? So 100% renewable electricity. That is a big step. Yeah? If we look at 225, their goals are defined, and we will check these organizations whether they achieve those goals, but to have in 3 years' time from now, 3 years' time, 100% renewable energy across the full network, meaning global. Yeah? Not so easy in some of the countries in Africa, for example, for this operator. But 100% of the network waste also should be reused, resold, and recycled. The 3 R's, and I think that is a very simple mechanism. But the aim is to be, in 2030, fully, let's say, on the net zero basis. Yeah? So all the emissions from operations should be fully eliminated. And then the next sentence, which is highlighted here, also discounts for the emissions from joint ventures, use of sold goods, and supply chain. Which means that if you supply to a mobile operator, yeah, you will be asked to be net neutral. Yeah? And that is where we have to work at. How to do that? Some of the R's were just mentioned. I think the first thing to do in the companies, your own company, is to raise awareness insofar you have not yet a program. Reduce, not so difficult. Reuse, recycle, also refuse. You can refuse also, let's say, certain suppliers or certain goods if you know that they are from a distinct area which needed transport or whatever. Recapture, that is possible, of CO2, and resell. Yeah, so these R's, I think it's very simple. But I think the aim is that we all, as we are here, big and small, medium and small, that we have our strategy with targets, budget, plans, and execution, and people working on it. Can be voluntary. Yeah? You can have a green team in your organization. I met with a building company, huge building company, and the people are very enthusiastic. It's not just the top, it's not the CEO, it's not the board. No, it is also not only the, let's say, purchase manager who gets the role to become neutral. No, it's all of us. And I think embedding that is the most important step, that you have people working on it. And I think, by the way, especially also young people, they love to work on it because it gives purpose. Yeah? And that is what we see more and more, to be purpose-led. Next steps, to have your own reporting, but also tools and mechanisms in the company to measure the up and downstream CO2 emissions, so that you can control the total emissions. So that also you can do via digital ways. But also I've seen a company who has just a very smart SMS application to provide information back to the head office about fuel used, as an example. Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot to it, and very pragmatic things you can implement. Some examples which I just want to show, and I'll keep the speed a bit. A very nice game brought by Infosys, created for the Financial Times, where you can play and take the role of a climate minister and see how you can manage the emissions. And this game, based on real facts, is helping to understand the difficulties, but also where the opportunities are. Online, let's say, donations can be done, and this is also possible via online applications like Climeworks, where you can donate and compensate your travel, your air travel, or even your car travel, and collect points and even be ranked. Yeah? So that is all different mobile applications. Because of time, I will not go into very much detail of this slide, but there's a need for every company to work on strategic planning. This slide was taken from the OECD task force, and you see on the left, let's say, a stipulation of the risks, financial risk, but also, of course, there are the opportunities. In the end, it has a financial impact on your revenues. Yeah, it can be positive, like these companies who create mobile applications. It can also be negative. There can be cost factors to it, which has influence on the cash flow. But for sure, if investments are needed, it also has a lot of influence on the balance sheet when it comes to capital and financing. Yeah, so this is what the bigger companies look at, but in the end, it is our own bread and butter, which we're looking at for the future. So with this short presentation, I hope to create a bit of awareness what's happening in the telco industry. And in future sessions, we will work with climate experts and some OpCos, operational companies, mobile operators, to share their visions as well. And further reading is possible. Just let me know if you would like to have reports or access on different information. Then we can share that. And having said so, it's now a little bit time to go into a Q&A session. And I will come and sit next to you, Jan Willem. Maybe we can have, you have the mic working?
I think so, yes.
Good, okay. First question from my side, Jan Willem. We are here together and we hear the ambitions, the big ambitions of the net zero by 2030. Do you think that is possible from your experience working in sustainability in the value chain?
I think the future will have to tell, Gert-Jan. But one thing, and Dario and Gert-Jan, thank you for me inviting me here today. Being in your line of business, I think, is a very relevant line of business to get to 2030. The way we look at it is where we believe that to get to more sustainable value chains, and with value chains I mean product or services value chains, like from innovation, product design, engineering, sourcing, manufacturing, fulfillment, the actual usage phase, and of course trying to close the loop from a circular perspective. To get to this kind of more sustainable value chains, inherently the value chain needs to become smart. To become smart, inherently it means you need to basically wire it up and make it digitally available. And I think that is where your industry will play a very important role to provide the connectivity between an individual product and a process, between a usage and a piece of circularity, for example. So from that kind of perspective, I would say, Gerrit-Jan, I think there is a tremendous need for getting the technology to work, to make product value chains more sustainable, and that's where I think this group of organizations play a very important role. And one thing maybe to add, I think we heard today a lot about the energy side, the emission side of the spectrum, and that is indeed a big topic. We read about it every day, but it is not just the only one. I mean, if we think back about the United Nations Sustainability Goals, there are 17 of them. Energy is almost only one. There are 16 others. If we think about our food value chain, how is food produced? How do we make sure that there is energy security for still 2 billion more people? So there are many more goals. So to me, the topic is even more complex than trying to solve for the global warming aspect. It is also trying to solve for all the other things we need to work on.
Yes. And when you saw the slide on risk and opportunities, do you therefore rather think this can be an opportunity for the telecom sector?
Like you said, Gert-Jan, there are always multiple perspectives on either the industry or a product or a service. First of all, yes, I think there is a tremendous kind of opportunity in the increased need for connectivity, for wiring up services, products, and make sure that those kind of product and product value chains are indeed going to be more sustainable. At the same time, and I think going back to your presentation, many pictures there are about today, about climate change happening today. And inherently, it means you need to consider your resilience as an organization to what climate change might do to you. And if you're as an operator, have actual infrastructure out there, where is that infrastructure? How is it exposed to changing weather patterns? How is it exposed to, for example, changing water levels? Understanding that part and knowing, can I still access my tower throughout the year, or will there be windows when that's not possible anymore? But also requirements on, for example, requirements you're going to see from your customers about prove to me that the material you're using is, for example, 20, 30, 40, 50% based on circular materials. And certainly that means, well, are you then changing where you're buying materials, with what kind of parties you're going to work with? And to be able to understand your exposure and your risk to, in the narrow sense, climate change, it is very important to understand your current performance. And that's, I think, one thing, again, what we see at this moment happening. If I look across industries, we've had, of course, a period where each organization will have had set their targets, be that 2025, 2030, 2040, 2050. That's mostly done. Those targets have been set. You're now getting to the stage where we see organizations want to understand, what's my current baseline? What is at a very granular level my actual ESG performance? Again, not only from an emission perspective, but also, for example, in the social area, in the governance area. And that's where we see a lot of activities. That's also where we see a lot more need for, again, connect manufacturing lines, production processes, transportation. It's not about just getting that container from A to B. It's understanding where is that truck driving? Is an alternative route better? Is he planning for making sure that that route is, for example, not driving close to, here in Europe, the European nature reserves because of the nitrogen depositions over there. Just understanding the exposure of your current organization allows you from there to both plan, okay, how do I get to my 2030, 2040, 2050 goal, but also understand from a business operations perspective, where do I need to build resilience into my organization?
Yes. And talking about organizations, you as Accenture support, I think, 90% of the Fortune 500. So you work with all the big companies. And if you then think about setting a target, making a strategy and a plan, what's your observation of the industry, cross-value, let's say cross-industries? Where are we and how? What's your feeling? What can you share? Are we too late? Are we too early? Is it easy? How is it going out there?
Well, if you believe the report and you look around, we're probably late. The question is, can we catch up? I think is what we all need to put our effort in. We ourselves put ourselves targets for 2025, both on the perspective of an emissions perspective, being net zero by 2025, but also from a circularity perspective, especially electronic waste. And it goes back to your example, Gerrit-Jan, from France. That's the main thing we have. And then water as a third topic. What I see mostly happening at this moment is that organizations closer to consumers are more active with this topic. And why is that? On one hand, we see the consumer is starting to demand more in this space, understanding what am I buying, what's in the product, how did it get there. So we see quite some pull coming from consumer goods kinds of companies. Yeah? At the same time, we know on the other side of the spectrum, more and more regulation is coming in for the big emitters, the heavy industry, but that's probably a lot more regulation driven, where what we see with the consumer goods companies is much more driven out of market demand and changing market patterns.
Yes. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing. Are there any questions from you? Or from, yeah, we have a question there in the back.
Thank you. Jan Willem, you spoke about what role we're playing currently to reduce the actual global impact, the climate impact. I also saw the stat that we are responsible for 180 kilograms per person. How is that 180 kilograms made up of? Do we have an idea on that?
I don't know exactly where Gerrit-Jan got this number from, but at least, I mean, if you think it through, and that's again one of those aspects where we believe product value chains will get connected, because what a retailer might sell to me as a consumer, yeah, is coming from a manufacturer. There might be transport in there. It might be mines on there. And what you now start to see in industries is they're starting to build slowly the transparency to really understand the end-to-end aggregated contribution of a product. Yeah? And although with a product like this, it might be that the emission is not fully with the end user, the actual production of the product in its manufacturing process, in the mining process, where the maintenance is done, is also creating a footprint of emissions.
Would I be correct in assuming that a lot of our sort of impact, negative impact, is energy consumption?
Energy consumption is a big component, but like what I described for ourselves, we're also services companies. Yeah, so we are not just focusing on energy and emissions itself. We're also focusing on water. We're also focusing on circularity of materials, because we believe we all have to contribute to our respective areas. Yeah, and also I mean, you will have service operators here, which like ourselves are not always in control on everything they do. Yeah, they're buying a lot of services, but there will also be operators here which have physical capital build projects in there, and they can probably make a lot more decisions about how to become, for example, circular.
Thank you.
Hello, James from Mobile Ecosystem Forum. I've got a couple of questions myself about sustainability. We talk very much in business messaging, so much at conferences about the big brands, how they use messaging, omni-channel, UCaaS, CCaaS, CPaaS, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to be covering all of that today and tomorrow. But I've got a session tomorrow all about how we bring on the next 100 million SMEs into business messaging, given we heard from Nick Lane that only 5% of the 306 million registered businesses are actually even using SMS today. How do we go about getting it across to smaller companies who don't have a massive workforce, who don't have budget for a nice department for all of this, that it is actually worth them being sustainable? How do we go about doing that for the small ones?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know whether the regulators will force us, like we have with the large operators, the stock-listed companies. So that depends, I think, per country. But also, I think big things and shifts, mind shifts, start with us, with ourselves. We are already, let's say, reusing materials. We are already recycling the glass bottles, whatever. So. But I think what we have to do is raise that awareness within our companies. Make it, and it's very simple, make it just a fixed agenda point in every board meeting. It's very simple. What do we do? Yeah, ideas, brainstorm sessions, and start small. Yeah, why lease cars, which are SUVs? Yeah, it can consume a bit less. Yeah, so if we want to reduce 50% by 2030. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but we have to get going. And that I think the awareness creation is most important. And in the end, like Jan Willem says, companies which are closer to the consumer have to make that change fast because the consumer is demanding it. Yeah? So I think there we are more in the B2B, yeah? But therefore we will be forced automatically maybe by our customers, yeah? And then you have to, like Dario said at the start as well, we have to be compliant sooner or later.
Maybe one thing to add in on that one, James, one of the reasons we as a firm gave ourselves an ambitious target and are really committed in investing to get there is we hear from our people working in our organization that this is a very important topic for them. This is part for them about, do I want to work for an organization like Accenture? And to me, size is not mattered in there. If you want to get access to good talent that wants to work for you, even if you're in a small or medium size of business, your value proposition as an organization needs to be matching what they're looking for. And if you're not able to attract talent anymore because you're basically saying as an organization, we're not working on this topic. And it doesn't mean you have to solve everything like Gerrit Jan is saying, but at least actively working on the topic. I think there's also a risk from a talent perspective. Can you still attract the right talent to be a successful business?
The second part of my question was to do with enforcement. If you look at the world of messaging, many of us in this room very, very well know we can route test, for example, a business SMS supplier, see that we're getting 99% successful delivery. We can see the route is direct or just one hop. But unless we continue testing every day or every week, there might be the temptation for a little bit of slippage to come in there. So who should be the police ensuring that today if I sign up and I commit that 40% of my material is recycled goods, that actually it really is next week or in a month's time? Because signing up once at the point of sign up is great, but an ongoing compliance thing, that is massive, and that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. And that goes back, I think, James, to what I said at the beginning is, I mean, out of COP26 came the recognition that standards are all over the place. And that needs to get consolidated back because for business it is just too complex to comply with so many different standards. But the second thing is, indeed, is with standards, is it about being compliant or do you want to have fully integrated ways of understanding what's happening out there? Because the last thing you want is after the end of the year, you need to send an auditor in there to audit everything to make sure it adds up. And that's also why we believe that digitization, driven by the kind of services that a user organization deliver, is so crucial, because the moment you can measure it, the moment you can then record it, report it. You can do something with that part. And that inherently, if that's done correctly, has its own almost audit trial in there, and you can prove that you're actually trending in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good. I think that's concluding then our session, unless we have anything online we have to tackle. No? Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Gerrit-Jan and Jan-Willem, thank you very much.